Scott Ritter is here, and of course, Scott Ritter. I mean, I saw him on RT the other day, and it was interesting. I don't know if you saw me because I don't know if you are able to really see when you get called on RT, who's behind. Because sometimes, when you get called on, you don't have the video up
Right.
of whatever RT is doing. But yeah, welcome, Scott. It's nice to see you again.
Well, thanks for having me.
Yeah.
I can see you now, so I know who I'm talking to.
There you go. You could recognize the voice and match it up next time. So,
and if you guys don't know who Scott is, he is a U.S. Marine Corps intelligence officer, former U.S. Corps Marine intelligence officer, and he's really great at analyzing the current situations that have been happening a lot involving, the military, the U.S. government, the intelligence apparatus, and that sort of thing. So that's why we wanted to have him on. So thank you, Scott, for coming on. And, we've seen a decline in the amount of soldiers, right? And morale, you kind of sort of touched on that before within the Ukrainian military. But recently, the United States has given billions more to Ukraine, to the detriment, of course, of a lot of Americans who are really, really increasingly getting upset that these billions are going to war when the economy is not doing so well. Do you see an end to this conflict anytime soon at all?
Well, I mean, soon is a relative term. This conflict will end. It will end in a decisive strategic Russian victory, not just on the battlefield in Ukraine, but in terms of the European security framework. Russia is going to be in a much more powerful position post-Ukraine conflict than it was when it was trying to negotiate a new framework with NATO and the United States back in December of 2021. Economically, the world's changed. Prior to this conflict, I think the popular opinion that, at least the way it was expressed ignorantly so in the West, was that Russia was just, it was a big country, just a giant gas station. That was it. That's all they had going economically. And the implication was that the Russians just didn't know how to do business. They weren't very sophisticated on the global stage, and they were totally dependent upon the West for whatever passed for middle class, economic activity. The script's been flipped. Russia's the dominant economic power right now. It's energy. Yeah, I mean, it's a big gas station, but it's a smart gas station. They've shown incredible sophistication of the world energy market and how to ensure that even as the West sought to slit their own throats by cutting themselves off from Russian energy, Russia was able to find alternative markets. And Russia's running a massive surplus right now, whereas the West is not. I don't mean to laugh because it's sad, actually. It's sad for the people of Europe who are going to pay a heavy, heavy price this winter. And it's just sad for Russia. It didn't have to come to this. None of this had to happen. There's a lot of people out there saying, well, Russia invaded. Russia did not invade. Russia's defending itself. Russia's defending its interests. It's NATO that invaded. It's the Ukrainian Nazis that invaded. They invaded the lives of ethnic Russians, perpetrating genocide-like murder on them. People need to study what happened in Odessa in May of 2014. They need to study what happened in Mariupol in the summer of 2014. They need to study what happened in the Donbass in the fall of 2014. They need to study what the Ukrainians did against the ethnic Russian population of Donbass from 2014 to 2022. Once you do that, once you realize that all this was taking place in the context of a NATO expansion, which was geared strategically to train the Ukrainian military using peace accords, Minsk peace accords, as a facade, as a method of buying time until which time NATO could train the Ukrainian military to retake the Donbass, that this was all fake. There was no effort on the West for peace. Russia had no choice. This is a tragedy what's going on. I mean, history is going to show that Russia is on the right side of history. As an American, that's sort of difficult for me to swallow. I mean, I'm not anti-Russian, but I'm damn sure pro-American. And I really, really, really want my country to be on the right side of history. I want to be the one holding the hand over, telling Russia, hey, you want to come over and be on the right side with us? You're welcome to come over. But right now, it's Russia squarely planted on the right side of history, and we're on the opposite side of the wall. It's a very sad thing, very sad thing.
We're here, ladies and gentlemen, with Scott Ritter, former UN weapons inspector. This is when I learned about Scott Ritter, because I was in high school when the whole Iraq situation was going on, and we were going to go in there for weapons of mass distraction, as we now call them, because they weren't weapons of mass destruction. Scott Ritter was the UN inspector. He was pleading with everybody, and correct me if I'm wrong, telling them, hey, listen, this is not the real thing over here. They don't have these weapons of mass destruction. I think the ones they did have were given to them by the Rumsfeld regime back in the days, and they had an expiration date, I believe, some of them. Correct me if I'm wrong. But Scott, with that what happened in Iraq, you just mentioned what happened in 2014 when we overchanged the government. We were talking about Julian Assange just recently with this whole situation, the way they spied on him, even had microphones in the bathroom. Do you think we're at a point now of lawlessness when it comes to America and whatnot? Because it seems like they just constantly double down. They're never held accountable for these wars, these wars that these start, even proxy wars in Ukraine. Are we at that point of lawlessness now where Americans, the American government will never be held accountable for their actions?
Well, I mean, we've always been that way. Let's just be frank and honest about this. The post-World War II reality that emerged after the defeat of Nazi Germany, after the defeat of Imperial Japan, was one centered on, American domination, Bretton Woods, the economic domination of the world, the dominance of the dollar, the overwhelming supremacy of American military power. But we lived in a bilateral world defined by democracy led by the United States on one hand, communism led by the Soviet Union on the other hand. And when you have that kind of black and white existence, I'm not going to call it lawlessness, but it was more like martial law, meaning, we're at war, even though it's not a hot war, it's a cold war. Therefore, we are required to do things that we may not otherwise be doing if everything was fine and dandy. And that's, we saw the rise of the CIA. The CIA has always been an outlaw organization, and it's never been a good organization. I think people need to go back and take a look at the early years of the CIA and see what kind of utterly horrible things they're doing, assassinations, regime change. I mean, heck, they're doing that today. They haven't changed. It's a horrible, horrible organization, the most un-American organization that you can imagine. But in the Cold War, people would say, well, we need this kind of asset because the Russians are doing, the Soviets are doing the same thing to us. Those communist Chinese are out there. We need to be able to play in the shadows. Okay, I get it. But then the Cold War ended. And we had the decade of the 90s, and one would have thought that the United States would have said, okay, we no longer need to be under martial law-like conditions. We need to work with the world. We're not, we don't need to act as the self-appointed sheriff of the world, but we couldn't give it up. We were unable to say, hey, we want to work with everybody as equals. We said, no, we won the Cold War. We're now the superpower, and we expanded the CIA. The CIA gave us Kosovo. A lot of people don't realize that. They gave us Kosovo. The CIA gave us regime change, failed regime change in Iraq, attempted failed regime change in Iran. It's a horrible organization. The only reason why I'm saying this is coming in, I listened to the lawsuit, and I just want to reemphasize whatever points you were making, that the CIA is a lawless organization accountable to no one, and therefore it gets away with anything. Let me remind people that the CIA kidnapped people illegally around the world, put them in black sites around the world, and tortured them for no reason, and there's never been an accounting for it. None. And they're doing similar things to this day. They're murdering people. They're kidnapping people. They're destroying the economies of the world. It needs to go away, simply put. But it's not just the CIA. The United States acts as a rogue, out-of-control power. And it's even more today because the world's changed. It's not we're no longer the unilateral superpower that we were in the post-Cold War environment. We squandered that for 20 years of wasted military effort in Afghanistan, Iraq, and continuing today in Syria. Our economy is in tatters. China's running laps around us, and Russia just beat the heck out of us economically by boomeranging the sanctions back on us. And yet, you would think that this would have humbled us, that what we would do at this point in time is reach out to people and say, hey, we need to work together to get out of this calamity, this post-pandemic calamity, the economic ruin that's taking over Europe right now. But we're not. Listen to what happened in Africa. Tony Blinken went to South Africa and was confronted by the South African foreign minister. And she said, well, you, Tony, you're a gentleman. I don't hear from you. We will not tolerate the United States. My dog is seconding everything I'm saying.
I don't like Tony Blinken. I noticed that. The dog does not like him.
Doesn't like Tony Blinken at all. But she said, you cannot threaten us. You cannot threaten us anymore. We won't tolerate it. And even as she said that, the United States ambassador to the United Nations was in Africa and another country threatening them, saying that if you enter into economic relations with Russia, we will sanction you. This is the very thing that the Africans have said you're not allowed to do anymore. And it's not just the Africans. The whole world is telling the United States, stick it in your ear. We're tired of you. And I just wish that this would happen without the bloodshed, because what's really happening in Ukraine right now is Russia telling the United States and telling NATO and telling the Western world, stick it in your ear. Unfortunately, there's a lot of bloodshed attached to it. But Russia's not putting up with it anymore. I think we're going to find out the hard way that China's not putting up with it anymore. Africa told us to pound sand. India's telling us to pound sand. We don't have any friends anymore. Literally, we have no friends. We think we have friends. But, a friend isn't a friend when you have to bribe them, when you have to threaten them. That's what we do to Europe. There's not a single European friend right now, and no one likes us in Europe. They sold their soul to be under the American umbrella, but it's like the weakling aligning with the playground bully. It's still a playground bully, and eventually the weakling's going to realize we don't want to be with the bully. We want to be with the good guys over there across the field who let us play ball. So, no, the United States is, again, this hurts me to say it because, man, I've spent my life defending this country. I love this country, but we're not the good guys anymore. We're the bad guys.
And you mentioned how we have no friends, right? We've seen this uptick in the number of these NATO pro-Ukraine butt farms. But simultaneously, though, the shifting of the media has started to happen. We've seen the Amnesty International report, and we've seen many holes in the Ukraine narrative just completely come undone and come to light. The truth of all of this has come to light. Do you see a general positive trend towards telling the truth on this conflict? I mean, because it almost seems like a lot of the lies that were surrounding this whole narrative are being lifted up, and a lot of people are finding out, oh, wait a minute, like this conflict wasn't just, oh, Putin invaded and this war started in February of 2022. It goes back, and obviously we saw what happened with Roger Waters when he went on CNN and pretty much told the guy, the reality, you need to read about this, you need to go back, just like what you just said. So is this a good thing? Is this like an actual change towards truth?
Well, we'll see. It's a shift towards truth. Whether or not it manifests itself into actual change is another question. The policies haven't changed yet, and so it's one thing to have the media start to wake up. I mean, you can only tell a lie so often in the face of truth before you look foolish. And media organizations want to continue to deceive their public that we report the news, we report the facts. But if you take a look at everything they reported from the beginning of this conflict up until about a month ago, I mean, look, William Arkin used to be a respectable journalist. He writes for Newsweek now. I mean, as late as June and July, he was writing articles that started with the headline, Russia is losing this war. And then he would repeat the garbage that he was fed by U.S. intelligence community that for every Ukrainian lost on the battlefield, 10 Russians were dying. Hey, Bill, pro hint, no, not even close, pal. Not even when Ukraine was doing the best it was doing early on in the conflict, when Russia went in soft, got overextended. Even during that period of time, the casualty ratio was 5-to-1 advantage of the Russians. The Ukrainians have never had casualty advantage. They've always been getting their butts kicked. But right now, we're talking 20 to 30-to-1. I mean, the casualty ratio that's taking place right now is it's criminal almost. I mean, this has almost become murder. The supremacy that Russia is enjoying across the battlefield, across every aspect of the battlefield, is shocking. And it's become so shocking that people can't ignore it. I mean, they leaked, a Ministry of Defense, a Ukrainian Ministry of Defense paper got leaked out, 191,000 casualties. And that's just the Army, doesn't include the Air Force, the Border Guards, and others. If you add all that in, 250,000 casualties, 250,000. And the interesting thing about that is, even though it's leaked and now the press is looking at it, and you notice the mainstream media is not touching this with a 10-foot pole. But you still have the Ukrainian government knows the truth. They know what's happening. They know the reality. The U.S. government knows the truth. The British government knows the truth. All the powers that be know the truth, that the Ukrainian army is being crushed, being destroyed. And no matter what is done to retrain it, to re-equip it, you will never get ahead of this curve, that the Russians right now own the battlefield to such an extent that there's literally nothing that can be done to flip the script. So this war is over. It's over.
Yeah.
There's going to be shouting, some screaming, and the final act has to be played out. But it's over. There's no doubt. There's never been any doubt. But right now, there's really no doubt. Russia is winning decisively. The only outcome will be unconditional surrender, dictated by Russia to Ukraine. The sooner Ukraine surrenders, the better those terms will be. The longer Ukraine resists, the worse off it will be. And worse off could end up with there not being a Ukraine anymore. I mean, already the physical reality of Ukraine is fundamentally changed. It's not just that they lost Crimea and Donbass. They're going to lose the territories known as Novaya Rossiya, inclusive of Odessa, Kharkiv, Nikolaev, Dnipropetrovsk. These are all gone. Russia hasn't captured them, but they will, because the Russians have said, you made a decision to continue this fight. You are now going to pay a price. And the price you're going to pay is you will never again be allowed to govern over ethnic Russians. We will never entrust you with ethnic Russians again. You've shown yourselves to be a despicable, nationalistic, racist society. We can't trust you. We're going to crush you. We're going to defeat you. We're going to demilitarize you. We're going to denazify you. And we're never going to let you touch a Russian again. It's over.
Yeah.
That's a choice Ukraine made, but that's also a choice the United States made, Great Britain made, NATO made, everybody made.
Yeah. Isn't it funny how the people who claim to be the most anti-racist have a Ukrainian flag in their bio as their government that they are condoning is not, they're not condemning, they're allowing it, and they're actually standing behind it, sending weapons to Nazis. It's just, it blows my mind. And since we're talking about the CIA and their lies in the media, I feel we have to bring up Ken Delaney in too as well, who's been all over TV spreading CIA propaganda. But Zelensky, there's reports out there that he's starting to lose his cool, telling people to just really stop it. It seems like it's all gone downhill since Bono came to town. What's to happen with Zelensky moving forward as we see this military action play out? And it's just obvious to the people, the independent journalists on the ground showing us the truth that, just like you said, it's over. We're just waiting for the final curtain call. What's to happen to Zelensky?
Well, I mean, Zelensky's always been a puppet for this entire conflict. We need to understand that while he may have been elected with 78% of the popular vote when he ran for presidency, he was elected on an anti-war platform. In fact, many ethnic Russians voted for Zelensky on the hopes that he would bring an end to the Donbass conflict. He showed himself to be inadequate to the task, and his ability to govern collapsed. He dissolved his advisors, surrounded himself with sycophants, made common cause with the right sector, and we saw, his popularity plummet to around 23%. This is before the war. And two, in order to survive, he had to do such great democratic things such as outlaw opposition parties, ban opposition media, arrest opposition figures, and empower the Nazis. Empower the Nazis. I mean, that's what he did. Since the war started, his reputation was managed by a very sophisticated information warfare operation run by primarily the British, supported by the United States, where this failed actor, failed politician, was converted into the modern day equivalent of Winston Churchill. Heck, the man spoke to the British Parliament echoing the sentiment of Churchill. I can guarantee you he didn't write that speech. That speech was written by a British politician. The same thing that an American a British intelligence officer, an American intelligence officer wrote his speech to the U.S. Congress. This man is being manipulated. But again, you can only tell a lie so long before the truth comes out. What we know now is that for some time, there has been tremendous friction between the Office of the Presidency and the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense. And the Minister of Defense has about had it up to here with the president interfering with military operations, demanding, for instance, that geographic areas, including towns, be held when all military common sense says withdraw back to more defensible positions, preserve your combat power, and live on to fight another day. Instead, Zelensky says, no, we have to create the perception that we're winning, that victory is possible, so we keep them there so that we can get more money from the West, get more weapons from the West. And then next thing you know, 2, 3, 4, 5,000 Ukrainians are dead, never to come back. Tens of thousands more are wounded, never to come back. There's a gaping hole in the Ukrainian lines. The defense ministry is fed up, and I'll give you my assessment. Zelensky is not long for the office of the presidency. He will either be ushered out of country and put into his prepaid mansion to live off of his stolen wealth, or he'll be given the 75-cent solution, which is the price of one 9mm bullet in the back of his head. And that trigger will be pulled by a Ukrainian military officer who carries out a coup d'etat in order to restore unity of command to Ukraine. Zelensky is a disaster. Even the West is starting to realize this man is a disaster. There's a growing recognition that he presides over one of the most corrupt governments in all of Europe, if not, I can't say in the history of Europe because I haven't studied all the corruption in Europe, but Ukraine will definitely be up there. We're pouring billions of dollars without an inspector general, by the way. Rand Paul said, I need an inspector general before you hand $40 billion over to this corrupt regime. And Chuck Schumer and Mitch McConnell said, nope, we're just going to give it away. And we did. And it's in people's pockets. CBS News had to pull their report. 70% of the stuff ain't making it to the front lines. And if that's heavy equipment, what about the money? What about the money? I'll tell you how some of the money was spent. Some of the money, U.S. taxpayer money, was spent setting up a center for disinformation that blacklisted American citizens for daring to speak out, exercising their freedom of speech. Now, why is U.S. taxpayer money being sent to silence American citizens? Why? That's a good question. Now, they pulled it down because enough people have spoken up against it. But I guarantee we're still paying the salaries of the guys who made this list. This is not how U.S. taxpayer money should be spent. Well, I guess we should be grateful that it's actually being spent on something as opposed to going in somebody's pocket and being filtered out of country to support some drug lord who's vacationing on the Riviera right now. But still, the First Amendment clearly says that the United States Congress cannot pass laws that infringe on free speech. The United States Congress passed a law, which allocated this money, Public Law 117-128. That's the law. They gave this money to Ukraine to pay the salaries of civil servants, who then created a blacklist calling American citizens Russian propagandists and worse, information terrorists who deserve to be arrested and charged as war criminals. They did so in a press conference that was organized by a congressionally funded NGO and attended by the State Department. And Americans are still sitting at home twirling the thumb saying everything's okay. It ain't okay, America. You need to rise up in the street and let your voices be heard. Because if they can do it against me or anybody else, you know what? What am I charged with? Telling the truth. I, again, challenge anybody. I challenge you. I give you free reign. Show where I've lied. It's a challenge. It's out there. Your audience. Go through, find where I've lied, where I've misrepresented the fact, where I've come up wrong. I put my analysis out there against anybody. I've been wrong here and there. I'm not perfect. My name isn't Jesus Christ or Muhammad or anything like that. It's only Scott Ritter. I'm a human. I make errors. But you know what? I haven't been wrong strategically, and I really haven't been wrong all that much. But if I have been, even if I was wrong, you don't have a right to suppress me. Yeah. But to try and suppress a guy who's been right all along, it's criminal. And
Scott, I once saw you wear a striped tie. I once saw you wear a striped tie with a print shirt, and that was wrong when you did it. Just want to say
I agree with you. I agree with you. That was
like
wrong.
An optical illusion, but I appreciated the words you were coming out of your mouth. Go ahead, fam.
Scott, you talk about America going crazy and being the bad guys, right? We can't not talk about the big situation happening, the increasing tensions between China and the United States, because the United States is stoking the flames of war. They sent Pelosi. Now they just sent another delegation, and with, I think, Senator Markey. And they continue to say they recognize China, the China One policy on paper, and they do. They haven't recognized Taiwan's independence, but they continue to push in other ways. It's a very passive aggressive tactic that they're doing. Meanwhile, everybody wanted China to react and take Pelosi's plane down, something they never said they would do. They would say they said they might escort the plane down, but a lot of people saw that as a sign of weakness on China's part, that they didn't do that. I, for one, saw it as them going about it in an economic way, which they did with the sanctions and the control that they have over Taiwan. How does this affect what's going on in Russia, Ukraine? Because I find it has brought Russia and China much closer. These actions by the United States inadvertently has mirrored the relationship between Russia and China.
Well, the first thing I'll point out is for an American to sit there and call China weak for not going for the gun and instead using the checkbook. Hey, America, let me just give you a little. We've been going for the gun all our lives, and we're getting our butts kicked the last 20 years. So maybe go for the gun less and have a better, think about the checkbook more. James Carville, the Raging Cajun, gave some great advice back in 1992. It's the economy, stupid. And if you're not thinking about the economy, you're thinking about the wrong thing. Going for the gun ain't the solution. It should be the last solution after all other solutions have been done. So hooray for China for actually being a mature nation and not going for the gun. And that's one of the reasons why they're going to win this. Now, the Chinese have been saying, a lot of people think that China is only recently now moving over to Russia's side. But let me give a little bit of historical chronology here. Before Russia initiated its special military operation, its invasion of Ukraine, before President Putin met with Xi Jinping in Beijing on February 4th, where they issued their now famous or infamous, depending on which side of the fence you're on, joint statement declaring an end to the rules-based international order and the ascendancy of the law-based international order. The Chinese ambassador to the United States, I think on January 28th, gave an interview to NPR, National Public Radio. And in that interview, he said straight up, if America keeps talking the way it's talking and doing what it's doing, there's going to be a war between China and the United States. And the reason why I bring this up is, A, it's sort of remarkable that a Chinese ambassador would basically be stating as a fact that there will be a war between the United States and China if the United States doesn't tone it down. But two, that statement was made before the joint statement on February 4th, which means the Russians knew darn well what China's intent was regarding Taiwan and the United States. Russia knew that China was saying, hey, we're going to be at war with these guys eventually, and yet Russia wanted to jump on board. Why? Because China knew that what was happening to Russia was going to happen to them, and that it's better to fight these powers over in Ukraine than let this happen to them over here. I don't think the Chinese thought the United States would be insane enough to try and fight a two-front war, especially when they're losing so egregiously on the one front. But China isn't about, when they think war, they think more in terms of geopolitical influence as opposed to, just going for the gun. They're going to win. But China has said all along that if they are compelled to use military force to reunify Taiwan, then they have lost. That is a loss for them. They may have to do it because they can't tolerate independence on the part of Taiwan, either a declaration of or people treating Taiwan as an independent nation. That's their red line. But the preferred outcome is peaceful reunification. So China is going to do everything possible to achieve peaceful reunification. Imagine if an American politician treated our military with the same respect. You know, somebody who said we will do everything possible to avoid a war before going to war. Maybe we'd have more kids around because their fathers came home from a war and they married the girl next door and had babies, or a girl came home and married the boy next door. All these lives that we've terminated. We'd have other kids in Iraq, in Syria, elsewhere, millions of them, because they wouldn't be dead because of our policies, because we had a politician with the courage to say, I choose peace over war. Well, China chose peace. That's a sign of strength. That doesn't mean they're bending over. Look, the Senate delegation landed in Taiwan. The first thing the Chinese did was start their war games again. You know, the war games that China did after Pelosi's maneuver proved that China can take Taiwan anytime it wants to. And so they're just making that point again. You know, if the United States continues this stupidity, then, you know, at some point in time, there are some very immature political elements in Taiwan who will think they can get away with it and they will declare independence. And then there'll be a war. And this is where it gets scary, ladies and gentlemen, because over the past 15 years, the United States has run a couple dozen war games about U.S. fighting China over Taiwan. We've lost every single one of them. We can't win a war game because there's the recognition that we can't win a war against China, especially a war in the short term. You know, the best proof positive is take a look at General Berger, United States Marine Corps Commandant. When he came in, you know, he reviewed the Marine Corps' commitment to implement the National Security Strategy and the National Defense Strategy, which are directives from the White House and the Pentagon. And he said, we can't do it. You guys are telling us to be able to do something to challenge China in the South Pacific or South China Sea. We can't do it because we're married to a legacy that has us putting tens of thousands of Marines on a big ship and then sailing that ship towards a shore that's now defended by advanced missiles that'll sink the ship before it gets there. Well, if they can sink a Marine amphibious ship, they can sink a carrier. They can sink the entire carrier battle group. That's all the United States has when it comes to China. We're getting ready to sail ships up Taiwan Strait. Now, China is not going to sink those ships because China's smart. But, you know, China is going to ratchet up the pressure. And at some point in time, hit the boiling point, China will have exhausted every peaceful option. They will have to go to war. And then what does the United States do? Because we had the commander-in-chief, Joe Biden, say in Japan that if China attacks Taiwan, we're going to come to their defense. With what, Joe? With what? You don't have anything to come to their defense. You're going to sail a fleet towards Taiwan, and you're going to force the Chinese to sink it. And when you sink an American fleet, 12 to 15,000 Americans die instantly. And now what, Joe? Let me tell you what's going to happen. You're going to be getting phone calls from Congress. You're going to be getting phone calls from everybody saying, we can't allow this to happen. We have to retaliate. The only way of retaliating is a W-76-2 low-yield nuclear warhead on a Trident missile loaded on an Ohio-class submarine. The only option you got, Joe, is you can't let the Chinese win. Fire it, Joe. Fire it, Joe. Fire it, Joe. And that coward's going to push the button. They're going to take out a Chinese naval facility on Hainan Island. We know it. It's already been predicted. Then when the Chinese are going to go, oh, really? There goes Guam. Maybe there goes Seoul. Maybe Tokyo, too. Then we're going to go Shanghai, and they're going to go L.A., and then the world's over. That's what's going to happen. And it's written in stone because everything I just said is predictable. Otherwise, what you expect the United States, now that the president said we're going to come to Taiwan's defense, to do nothing? Joe needs to go. And we need sane leadership. And I think the Chinese right now are trying their best to buy time. So maybe after November, then we move into January, we have a Congress that isn't going to be in love with China, but at least recognizes we don't want to go to war with China.
Yeah.
And, you know, that would be nice.
I think that's wishful thinking, Scott. Really, I think we always keep saying you meet the new boss, same as the old boss. But while we're on Taiwan, because I think you also pointed out that when Nancy Pelosi went there, they started doing these drills out in the ocean, almost mimicking an invasion of Taiwan. And I think they had a grin on their face. But I also think this is about a few things. The semiconductor chips. I think that China is also in a position knowing that they control a lot of the production of semiconductor chips with Taiwan. And if they eventually take it back, I mean, it is theirs anyways, that they'll control that market. And I also want to point out, I think, Scott, I think you can answer this question too as well. That plane was never in danger of being grounded. Nancy Pelosi wouldn't have brought her son Paul along had she known that plane could be shot down or grounded. Isn't there some truth to that statement right there?
I'll have to disagree with you on that one. I mean, I think if she had confidence it wasn't going to be shot down, it's because she was briefed by the U.S. government, who may have received some inside information from China that they're not going to shoot it down. Look, the Chinese didn't want a war, but and I believe the Chinese would have done everything in their power to broadcast to the United States, don't do anything stupid. Look, we were stupid. We launched a dozen fighter planes from Japan to provide an escort. We brought the Ronald Reagan close to provide a fighter escort. But I tell you, those fighters never aggressively deployed because they didn't want to have a conflict with China. But I don't think that this was collusion between Nancy and China. I think the Chinese hate Nancy, didn't want that plane to land. She forced the issue, but I don't think this was something that was predicated early on. I think that she created a very dangerous situation. Look, the Chinese spent billions of dollars redeploying their troops. They spent billions of dollars carrying out these exercises, and they're spending billions of dollars, well, yuan equivalents of dollars, sustaining these troops. It's a very expensive proposition for China, and it's a very dangerous proposition. All we need is one mistake to be made on the median line between the Taiwanese and the Chinese, and there will be a war. So I don't think Nancy flew in there with a predetermined outcome. I think Nancy flew in there being told that China was probably not going to intercept her, was not going to escort her down, was not going to attack while she was on the ground. But, Nancy's not in control of that situation. Again, all that would have had to happen is a Taiwanese air defense system launch a missile against a Chinese aircraft, take it down, and all bets are off. And Nancy would have been stuck on the ground in Taipei as the airport got blown up and Chinese troops came in. I think this was a very dangerous, foolishly dangerous, precipitous action on the part of Nancy Pelosi. I don't think she had any guarantees up front.
Why did Paul?
Ask her. Ask her. I don't know. I mean, it's a stupid thing. It shows how corrupt she is. She brought Paul because she's a corrupt individual. She's Paul because he practices ongoing nepotism. I mean, this is ridiculous. Come on, what role did he play? Is he a government official? Or is he in there?
I think it's more like the Hunter Biden situation.
Bingo.
Probably, yeah.
Bingo. Yeah. Yeah, it's nepotism, pure and simple. Look, this is the woman that you're getting me down the wrong path here. But look, she allows insider trading to be carried out by her husband. And then she allows her son to use her name for empowerment, and she's there to cement the relationship, whatever relationships her son did over there. Look, this is what the FBI should be carrying raids about, not anything else.
Gotcha.
That's my next question. Actually, what we're seeing with Trump and the supposed classified documents he had. What do you make of that? I see that as a distraction. I see that as an attempt to perhaps cover up information that could be there. It's a complete and total there's been a lot of flip-flopping on liberals supporting the FBI, conservatives wanting to abolish the FBI suddenly. It's a very crazy world in the United States right now when we're talking about crazy. Yeah. And it seems just more of theatrics back with the Trump versus Biden. And this administration isn't doing itself any favors, but this added just what people are calling a witch hunt on Donald Trump, whether people like him or not. This is the first time this has happened in this way to a former U.S. president and obviously potential candidate for 2024. So it just seems like an overstepping, obviously, of the FBI and their powers, which we have seen it as a trend, right?
Well, I'll say this again. First of all, there's no love lost between me and the FBI. It's an organization that was created with no legitimate purpose back in the early days of J. Edgar Hoover. It has no legitimate purpose. It could easily be replaced by any number of agencies. It's an arrogant power that's abused its power from day one. It should be dissolved instantaneously. And anybody who's ever carried a badge for the FBI should be denied employment in law enforcement from now on because you're corrupt from the moment you join the FBI. And I dare any FBI agent to challenge me on this one. Let's go for it, boys. But having said that, what the hell was Donald Trump doing with those documents in Mar-a-Lago? I mean, yes, I know that the President of the United States, while he is serving as a chief executive, gets to declassify. He's the ultimate classifying authority, and he can do whatever the hell he wants. This is what frustrated people because he brought in Sergei Lavrov and the Russian ambassador, and they had a conversation that was allegedly, it was about Syria, but it dealt with intelligence provided by Israel. And everybody's freaking out. I'm saying, shut up. He's the president. He gets to do whatever he wants to do. It's not illegal. If the president says, I declassified, and everybody's like, well, there's rules and procedures for you, but not for the president. I mean, if the president's in a good mood, he can go along and do that kind of stuff, but it ain't the law. So right off the bat, I'll say, Trump, you shouldn't have had those documents. End of story. There's no excuse for you to have those. There's a procedure in place for you to gain access to those documents. If you needed those documents, go through the procedures. FBI, he didn't break the law. So why are you raiding his office? And we know why, because the FBI is a corrupt organization, and it's proven that it is an anti-corrupt Trump animus that dates back to Crossfire Hurricane 2016. We know that Merrick Garland is a man with a grudge against Trump because he blocked him from getting to the Supreme Court. We know that the Democratic Party has been using Donald Trump and politicizing the attacks on Trump. This whole thing stinks. The whole thing stinks. And at the end of the day, if it's about documents in the possession of Donald Trump, I'm sorry. Again, I'll just stay right up front. Donald Trump should never have had those documents at Mar-a-Lago. Should never have had those documents.
Yeah.
Ever. There's no reason for him to have those documents. Having said that, as president, if he put those documents on his desk on his last hour of his term, and holy water and sprinkled it on it and said, I declassify thee, I declassify thee, I declassify thee, they're declassified. And you can't do anything about it, FBI, because he runs the show. We can disagree with how he's running the show. We can disagree with his motives and all that good stuff, but he runs the show. So shame on the FBI. But again, they're so corrupt. They know what they're doing. And shame on Merrick Garland. But again, he's corrupt. Shame on the Democrats. They're corrupt. Shame on everybody. I mean, even Donald Trump. Shame on you, Donald Trump. You've embarrassed our nation. You should never put us in this situation. You should never have. There should never have been a raid on Mar-a-Lago. But you know what? I think it's going to turn out to be one of the best things he ever did in his run for the presidency in 2024. Because now he has changed the script. He has turned himself into a martyr. And that's all we're going to be talking about. And the nation's going to become polarized. And he very well, I mean, I think if he announces he's going to get the nomination, and I think if he go, who are the Democrats going to put up against him? So
Pete
I mean,
Buttigieg.
Well, there you go. Now it's Trump 2024 automatically. I mean,
Scott, you had mentioned Syria earlier, and you mentioned Donald Trump, and all I can hear from Donald Trump was when he was in Iraq, we were there, we should have took the oil. You take the oil. And then when he was in Syria, we should take the oil. We're taking the oil so ISIS doesn't get it. We've seen footage of drones. I think it was Russian drones filming convoys of U.S. personnel stealing oil and wheat out of Syria. What gives? And I mean, this is the problem with a lot of the conservatives that right now they are okay with this kind of behavior to say that we should take the oil.
Well, two things. One, whether we admit it or not, we still have an anti-Assad. We have a regime change policy in Syria. We want Assad gone. We're still, it's never changed. They'll say, but remember, Mike Pompeo, when he spoke before the Texas A&M, the CIA, we lie, we cheat, we steal. Well, so does the entire U.S. government. Michael McFaul, the esteemed former ambassador of the United States to Russia, when confronted about statements that showed that he lied to the Ukrainians, said, of course we lied. Put on your big boy pants. It's a real world. It's a real world. Okay, in your world, you're a liar. Being a liar is okay as a senior diplomat. No other universe accepts this, Michael. But you're good with being a liar. Be a liar. We're lying about Syria. We have regime change policy, and part and parcel of the regime change policy is not only are we sanctioning Syria, but we're denying Syria access to funds that can be generated through the sale of oil. And remember, for all the grain we take away, look at the price of grain on the market now. If we take grain away from Syria, they have to buy it elsewhere, which means they're going bankrupt in the process. What are we doing with this oil and grain? Well, it ain't coming to America. What we're doing is we're turning it over to the Kurds, the Syrian Kurds, because we've given them sort of autonomous status, but they don't have real income generation capability. So by selling this oil, by selling this grain, They are generating funds that they use to underwrite, their self-governance. So that's what we're doing. But also keep in mind, who are they selling it to? Because this isn't going out on the legitimate market. So, we might find that they might actually be selling it to, ISIS, Al-Qaeda, and other people of this ilk. So, shame on the United States again. We have a horrible policy. I just want to remind every American listening that when you see a Russian airplane in Syria and you see an American airplane in Syria, one of those has been invited there by the legitimate government in Syria, and the other one's there in violation of international law. Let me give you a pro hint. America's there in violation of international law. Again, the fence, the right side of history, the wrong side of history. Why are we always on the wrong side of history? Why are we always doing the bad things? That has to give people pause. Why are we the bad guys all the time? Show me one place in the world where we're the good guys today. Please. I want to go to sleep tonight having a dream of America doing good things in the world today. But I can't. We're not doing good anywhere. Nowhere.
I'm trying to think. I can't think of anything. Fam, could you find a place we're doing good at?
No. And that's where my last question is, Scott. The American people are suffering, right? We've talked about the record high inflation. We see homelessness. In California, it is a complete and total disaster, right? I'm in Moscow right now. There is next to no homelessness. The subways look like museums. You go to a New York subway, you see what that looks like. The infrastructure is falling apart in the United States. The gas prices have finally gone a little bit down, but now the housing market is in trouble because there's the prices have lowered, but the interest rates have gone up, and there's so much more going on. There's a buying up of real estate by these mega corporations like Vanguard and BlackRock, and then you have, of course, a population that has so much apathy because they don't feel like they can make a difference, and an election system that has so much distrust, politicians that are all war criminals or warmongers, censorship. I mean, it goes on and on and on. And then, of course, we see the billions and billions of dollars being given to Ukraine, the billions being given to Israel, weapons used to kill Palestinians, weapons used to be given to Nazis, neo-Nazis. And so where does this leave the American people, Scott? The American people, you said, should be out in the streets. Why aren't they? What is it going to take for the American people to say enough and get out in the streets and say, we will not allow our tax dollars to go to fund these wars and these war criminals. We will not allow more regime changes and more coups. We will not continue to have this bloodshed in our name. And especially also, it may be selfish to think about, but guys, you are not seeing any benefit from this happening in your name. And we haven't seen any benefit. And there's nothing changing in terms of the economics or the political sector. What do you say to the American people who are suffering right now? Because many of them are, and they're talking about it increasingly on media and all of the time. We have a nation of young people in debt. What do they do? What should they be doing? And when is it going to be enough for them to be out in the streets and actually organize against this national security state apparatus ruled by the military industrial complex?
Big question, deserves a big answer, but I'm going to make it actually pretty simple. And I don't think I'm falling. I don't think I'm falling down the trap of being too simple. When I joined the military, I took an oath to uphold and defend the Constitution of the United States of America against all enemies, foreign and domestic. That was an oath that I was willing to give my life in defense of. That means I'm willing to give my life in defense of a piece of paper, parchment with words written on it, words that define who we are and what we are as a people. It's our document collectively. The Supreme Court of the United States has said repeatedly that the Constitution belongs to the American people. It doesn't belong to the Supreme Court. It doesn't belong to the presidency. It doesn't belong to Congress. It belongs to the American people. It's our document. How can we defend that which we do not know and understand, cherish? I mean, we know how to defend our families. We know what our wife is. We know what our kids are. We know what our home is. We know what our property is. We're willing to defend this stuff because, you know, that we understand it. We comprehend it. But how many Americans know about the Constitution, know what it is, know what role it plays? You know, I sat here and got pretty incensed about the violation of my First Amendment rights. How many Americans know what the First Amendment truly is? And it doesn't take long. It's not just about reading the Constitution. Go ahead and read the relevant, case, the precedents set by the Supreme Court that define how these amendments are, acted on in life. You talked about the Fourth Amendment, protection against illegal search and seizure. How many Americans truly understand this? You can't defend that which you do not know. And so as long as the American public remains ignorant about the Constitution, it defines their nation, defines who they are, what they are, they're powerless. You're literally powerless because if we expect them to get in the streets about these things, but if they're ignorant of them, how are they going to get into the streets? Why are they going to get in the streets? We saw, people get, it doesn't matter which side of this equation. Look, in America, I believe everybody has a right to have their own opinion. And when you have a nation of 300 million thinking people, you're going to have different opinions, and that's okay. So on the abortion issue, we saw people on one side and on the other side, and we see people get incensed about that. And, the people that I've heard speak about this on either side have points that they make, well thought out points, and ultimately that'll be decided. Guns, the Second Amendment. We have a lot of people that are, brought up about that. And again, we have debates on both sides of that issue. That's good. But we need to have that debate about everything, about the totality of America. We can't allow America to be defined by abortion rights and gun rights. That's stupid. I'm sorry. I don't mean to be insulting people, but abortion rights and gun rights is not what makes this country great. The totality of the Constitution and the rights enshrined in the Constitution is what makes us great. And we're not living up to it. So again, pro-hint, that means we're not great. We're not a great nation. And I'll tell you, Americans, what should have put every American in the street with a 40 million man march on the White House to overrun the White House if necessary was Citizens United. The day we gave away citizenship to corporations. My God, Americans, do you understand that? That you, the American citizen now, are the equal of General Electric, of Lockheed Martin, of Raytheon, but you're not the equal because they got all the money in the world. They can come in and buy every politician in the world. All you get to do is cast a vote, and then they sit there and they beat you down economically. They beat you down. They make you work 2-3 jobs just to pay the bill. They're going to raise your taxes. You're paying through the nose for gas and food. Your paycheck's not going up. Who the hell has time to read the Constitution? Who has time to get in the streets and do all that? They're winning, guys. The system, the establishment is winning because they're beating the American people down to the point where we've stopped functioning as citizens. We are now, all we are right now is the opposite of citizen. We're simply bodies that are being moved around by corporations and higher things. We have to re-earn our citizenship, relearn our citizenship, and then act it out. If enough people go to the poll, you can put anybody you want in office. If enough people go to the poll, you can put anybody you want in office. I'll say that one more time to every American listener. If enough of you go to the poll and vote, you can put anybody you want in office, but that has to start before they put the names on the ballot. If you go to the poll at the last second and you're looking down through the names going, who the hell are these people? Why are they there? I didn't want them there. You lost already. You lost because the establishment's already won by putting the names on the ballot. You got to take control of democracy from the grassroots. You got to put the people on the ballot. You got to put them through the primary. You got to put them into office. And until that happens, we ain't going to see anything because it'll be too late. By the time the American people decide to rise up, it'll be too late. Democracy, Jefferson once said that, the tree of liberty has to be washed every few decades in the blood of tyrants. I think that's a cool statement. I don't want it because I've been involved in the shedding of blood. Guys, it's not an option. It's really not an option. If you think killing people is an option, get the hell out of my country. That's not what we're about. It should be about better ideas. not who has the better guns or the bigger arms. But the state right now is using the police, using law enforcement to bully you. You can beat law enforcement, not by fighting law enforcement, but by changing the laws, by putting better people in the office. Democracy is a powerful weapon. It's the most powerful weapon out there when you have a constitution that empowers you. So do this, guys. Flex your muscle. Flex at the ballot box. If you don't, I'm afraid the only solution is going to be a violent one. And when that happens, we've lost as a nation.
Scott, I think our audience is kind of like bursting at the seams over here because we're election people. And for an election process to work, we must have clean, fair, transparent, and trackable elections. And that's something we need to work towards. I think you're right. If we can change it at the ballot box, we can get people in there. But we got to make sure that system is not flawed, because we can see what happens when it comes to our foreign policy. It's actually flawed at the core. So that's something we need to work on as well. And we appreciate you coming on the show, being very passionate today. This has been one of our most viewed shows in a while because Twitter, YouTube, they've been censoring us for quite some time. And I've said it before, censorship is violence. We need to have more conversations like this to get to the bottom of the truth. Fam, do you have anything else for Scott before we get rid of Mr.
No, Scott. No, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your opinions, and sharing your analysis. It's really, like you said, we need to have these conversations. People really get a lot out of these conversations, whether we agree on everything or not. This is awesome. And you really bring a lot of logic and nuance to things, which is appreciated. Scott was banned completely by Twitter. Yep. So Scott, tell us where we can find you. You have a Telegram, right?
I have a Telegram page. Apparently, they say that, the imitation is the best flattery. So apparently there's a lot of fake Scott Ritters on Telegram right now. But I have a Telegram at Scott Ritter. And, if you go on there and you only see articles posted by me and Joe, then you're probably at the right place. If you see somebody talking about cryptocurrency or other nonsense, you're in the wrong place.
Scott Ritter, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much, Scott.
Thanks for having me.
See you around.
Yeah, I remember following Scott, UN weapons inspector in Iraq back in the days, man. He was just preaching it. He used to have the glasses on a lot too, as well. Looked like a more built Clark Kent. I love the guy, and I'm so glad he's doing the work today. That's amazing.